my name is Arthur, and I'm about to give the Heading for Extinction and What to Do About It talk. It's a talk that has been given thousands of times globally. Why? Well, because this talk focuses on the latest climate and ecological science, what is at stake, and what is also the social science behind the change we need to make in the time frame we need to make it. The talk is also a prerequisite for most local branches of Extinction Rebellion. I still recommend going to the talk in your neighborhood because the talk might have a more local context and also you get to meet your community. And spoiler alert, the call to action is to get up, act, and organize within your community, which means not sitting in front of your laptop at home. In the description of this video, there's going to be links to finding your local chapter, how to give a Heading for Extinction talk, all the resources you need, and hopefully translated in the language that you speak. And if it's not translated, reach out to the translations team or the trainings team. Alright, let's begin. Action is based on belief. When you're doing something, you have a purpose, and if there's any doubt in your mind, it's hard to get out on the streets and put your body on the line, or to organize, or to get out of your comfort zone.
I never had been arrested. I never had done anything even close to getting arrested.
So in this talk, we hope to put everything together, and the premise of this talk is to tell the truth and act as if it is real. Tell the truth is our first demand, act now is our second demand. So Extinction Rebellion is actually pretty simple and easy to get. So what is the truth? The truth is that we are in a climate and ecological emergency.
Climate change is quite simply an existential threat for most life on the planet, including and especially the life of humankind.
Since XR launched in the UK in October 2018, UK Parliament has announced a climate emergency, and so has many other countries,
like the entire European Union.
In recent months, climate emergencies have been declared by Canada and a number of other countries. I'm sure you've heard them. Cities have also sounded the alarm. Well, this morning, in a brand new declaration, 11,000 scientists from 153 countries are bolstering that claim.
The thing is, if we only tell the truth and don't act accordingly, then there is no sense of an emergency. It's like if I were to say to you, hey, I think there's a fire in this house right now, versus, oh, fire! So, in an emergency, we wouldn't be doing this. Here's what the science says. The Earth and the Moon are pretty much the same distance from the Sun, except the Earth is habitable because of our atmosphere. Our atmosphere keeps the Earth at a livable temperature so that at night it's not like the dark side of the Moon, where if we go out there, we'd freeze in an instant. The problem with greenhouse gases such as CO2 or methane is that once it gets into our atmosphere, it traps heat. And it's not like CO2 just comes and goes out of our atmosphere. CO2 could stay in our atmosphere for over 10,000 years. In fact, 4 out of the last 5 mass extinctions have been attributed to an increased rise of CO2. And right now, CO2 is rising 10 times faster than any time in the last 66 million years. We have 800,000 years of temperature and CO2 records that link the two. In leaked papers from ExxonMobil in 1982, they have actually predicted the exact amount of CO2 we would have in our atmosphere today. And so far, since pre-industrial times, our temperature has increased by 1.1 degrees Celsius. Now, you might not think that feels like too much of a change, but 1 degree could be the difference between a solid and a liquid. Small changes make big impacts in nature. Think about the food chain, for example. Ice melts and the algae on the ice disappears. Small shrimpies that feed on the algae disappear, and therefore Things that feed on the shrimpies, such as penguins, dolphins, and whales, disappear as well. And that explains the drastic decline of our wildlife, which has declined 60% in the last 30 years on average. Simultaneously, in that same amount of time, CO2 emissions have increased by 60%. And the craziest part is the last 30 years is the years that we've sounded the alarm the most. Since the 1988 IPCC report, scientists have been up in arms trying to explain the science to people, yet we have only been sleepwalking and accelerating into catastrophe. I don't know how you sleepwalk and accelerate, but that's what we're doing. At this temperature right now, we are already seeing dramatic effects of climate change. We're seeing Australia, Amazon, Russia, Siberia all on fire. In 2015, scientists finally were heard, and we had the Paris Climate Agreement, where nearly 200 countries signed an agreement saying that we want to limit Earth's warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid catastrophic consequences. 1.5 degrees means most of our corals have disappeared, ocean dead zones, ocean acidifications. At 2 degrees Celsius, we see a 99% loss of corals. We see mass die-offs in our oceans, and we see mass starvation as well.
At 2 degrees of warming, our agricultural yields would be significantly less bountiful, so we'd be having less food to feed more people. And the impacts are really everywhere you look. Flooding, hurricanes, other extreme weather, wildfires. It's estimated that at a little north of 2 degrees of warming in California, we'd probably have at least 4 times as many wildfires. And the impacts from China to Africa to the Middle East are just as dramatic. These are not challenges that can be contained or compartmentalized in any one place. The whole world would be transformed, and that's just 2 degrees. According to the UN, as soon as 2050, we could have as many as 200 million climate refugees. We're seeing a little test case of this with the Syrian refugee crisis that has scrambled European politics, but that was only produced by 1 million. And the UN says we're going to have 200 million by 2050. They think it's possible we could have 1 billion by 2050, which is as many people as today live in North and South America combined.
Now, thanks to the Paris Agreement, we probably would never reach that temperature, right? The problem is that after 4 years, countries haven't followed up with their pledges. They've been distracted by greed, money, short-term gains, and a groupthink mentality. What is the consequence of that? The consequence of that is that now, in this short amount of time, we went from 1.5 degrees to best case scenario 3 degrees. Which means that the temperature could actually even reach 4 degrees.
At 4 degrees of warming, which is where we're on track for at the end of the century, economists believe that we would have a global GDP that was probably 20% and possibly 30% smaller than it would be without climate change. 30% is an impact that's twice as deep as the Great Depression, and it would be permanent. It would mean $600 trillion in global climate damages, which is twice as much wealth as exists in the world today. There would be parts of the planet that would be hit by 6 climate-driven natural disasters at once. We would have twice as much war because there's a relationship between temperature and conflict. Our agricultural yields would be half as bountiful. We'd be dealing with mosquitoes carrying dengue and malaria flying as far north as the Arctic Circle. So public health would be completely scrambled as well. Everything that we know of as modern life, political life, cultural life would be scrambled by these forces. That's how dramatic they are, how inescapable they are.
And what's even more concerning is that the IPCC reports have continuously been conservative. Based on its nature of consensus and reporting, we've continuously observed natural truths that the IPCC has mispredicted and been conservative on. It also shies away from runaway heating, complete existential scenarios, such as the scenario described by Ranamanthan and Shu, who say that there's a 5% chance of absolute catastrophe in human extinction. It's like having your entire family on an airplane and saying, hey, take this plane, there's a 5% chance that it might go down. This is the reality, this is the truth, and this is the truth that we have to keep in mind when we act. This is the biggest crisis that humanity has ever faced, and By being alive right now, we have an overwhelming responsibility, and these years are so important, and each month has exponential consequences for our future generations. So it's a lot to take in, and right now I want to pause this video for actually however long you want and take a moment to reflect, grieve, and let it sink in. And when you're ready, come back, click play. We'll see how we could take this existential crisis and turn it into action, and we could turn despair into courage. All right, what can we do? In the last 30 years, we tried a lot. We tried petitions, we tried lobbying, we tried marching, we got millions of people on the streets, we had festivals, we had movies about climate change, we had celebrities change their lives and dedicate their lives to fighting climate change. Yes, it has accomplished things, but in that same time, we've put more CO2 in our atmosphere than the history of mankind. So what works? Check it out.
Nonviolent direct action is by far the most effective thing you can do to fight the climate crisis. Here's why. To achieve radical change, you have three options: conventional campaigning, violent revolution, or nonviolent direct action. Efforts like signing petitions, writing to Congress, or going to protests where people speak the truth but no one breaks the law have been aggressively pursued for 30 years, and they simply haven't worked. We've tried them a lot, and they aren't going to magically start working. Violent revolution statistically almost never works, and even when it does, it almost always descends into authoritarian chaos. Nonviolent direct action has repeatedly worked, and it's worked where these other efforts fail. Social science shows it's twice as likely to succeed as violent campaigns, and is achievable with a relatively small percentage of the population. There are many successes in recent history. The social science is clear. Nonviolent direct action works.
When we launched in 2018, we read a declaration of rebellion.
We can't save the world by playing by the rules, because the rules have to be changed. Everything needs to change, and it has to start today. So everyone out there, it is now time for civil disobedience. It is time to rebel.
When a government fails to protect the lives and livelihood of its citizens, the people have a right to rebel. Or as Martin Luther King has eloquently put it,
that I do feel that there are two types of laws. One is a just law and one is an unjust law. I think we all have moral obligations to obey just laws. On the other hand, I think we have moral obligations to disobey unjust laws, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. I think the distinction here is that when one breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust, he must do it openly, he must do it cheerfully, he must do it lovingly, he must do it civilly, not uncivilly, and he must do it with a willingness to accept the penalty. And any man who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and willingly accepts the penalty by staying in jail in order to arouse the conscience of the community on the injustice of the law is at that moment expressing the very highest respect for law.
Extinction Rebellion has 10 principles. We also have 3 demands. And by following the principles and demands, you are free to act on behalf of XR. I'm going to have these 10 principles here, and I urge you to pause the video, read through it, and also try to remember it. We're also going to have an XR DNA workshop. It could be one locally, one online, but we're also going to create a video just like this that really dives deeper into these principles and demands, and then you can embody it and act. And I'll talk a little bit about demands briefly. Demand 1 is tell the truth, which is that this is an emergency. It's basically the first half of this talk.
Demand that our government tell the truth, that they act as if millions are dying and millions are losing their homes, because millions will die and millions are already losing their homes.
Demand 2 is act now. Act now to halt biodiversity loss. Act now to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2025. Extinction Rebellion is based on telling the truth and acting accordingly, and 2050 is simply just too late. And it's not like it's impossible. We've done the impossible before. We've sent people to the moon. We've also mobilized during war. In the US, factories shifted overnight for wartime mobilization. The emergency doesn't call for gradualist reform. It calls for a revolution. Demand 3. Beyond politics. Government must create and be led by a citizens' assembly on the climate and ecological crisis. Now, beyond politics does not mean that we're not political or apolitical. It means that we are not politically affiliated. We believe that politicians with their careers on the line, with corruption, with billionaire donors, with party politics, do not have the means to create the change that we seek.
The system that we have in the Houses of Parliament, it's built-in confrontation. So they nearly always oppose each other on principle. And that's how it works. It's set up as two rows of people shouting at each other. And that's a disaster.
In Britain, in Europe, in Africa, anywhere in the world, I have no faith that these governments will positively respond with the urgency to take the measures that must be taken right now to save humanity and the planet.
This is not a political movement. This is a movement of humanity.
So we resort to a citizens' assembly because the people who are affected should choose how their future should be like.
So a citizens' assembly brings together a randomly selected group of citizens, somewhere between 50 and about 150. So it's very easy once you get over about 50 people to make sure that they are a diverse group who have the age characteristics, the gender characteristics, the geographical characteristics, the class characteristics of broader society. That's very easy to do. And they're brought together, and over a period of time, they're facilitated to learn, to deliberate, and to come to decisions and recommendations. What's really important about citizens' assemblies is that they aren't run directly by government. Government may give them a task, it may sponsor the assembly, but the assembly is organised by an independent, trusted organisation, typically a civil society organisation, and the facilitators working in that citizens' assembly are independent. They are not civil servants, they have no connection with government. These are people who have spent their lives developing these kind of facilitation skills.
So no more party politics, no more knee-jerk opinion polls, no more whatever sounds good, and more informed decision making. Learn more about Citizens Assembly in this TED Talk here. We're going to put it in the link in the description below. It's been used before in many countries. It's been used in Ireland to break political gridlock, in same-sex marriage, on abortion, and even on climate change. It's also being considered and used in the UK right now, as well as in France, to tackle the climate and ecological emergency. In the US, we have a fourth demand, which is called Just Transition, which prioritizes the most vulnerable people, people of color, black people, indigenous people.
Our fourth demand is for a just transition that prioritizes and protects the most vulnerable people and those most impacted by climate breakdown.
It's disproportionately affected people who are poor, who are marginalized. One example of this, in this place called Puerto Rico.
Some would say that this is actually part of the third demand because it would happen naturally at a citizens' assembly, but in the US, we want to put emphasis on that. As you can see, the three demands focus on government. There's a lot of solutions out there, such as various ways of carbon capture, renewable energy, reducing demands, reducing emissions, but that would all be useless without political pressure. Politicians for the longest time have taken the path of least resistance, And with nonviolent direct action with disruption, we hope to make that path the path of most resistance. Now, does this work? I want to tell you about the story when I first joined XR. I spent a few months researching about climate change, and right when that was happening, UK announced a climate emergency. And that's when I heard about Extinction Rebellion. But I didn't really believe in their effectiveness until I saw it for myself. And it was completely accidental.
This is incredible. Europe is in uproar, and even at Cannes in France, we have Extinction Rebellion right at the red carpet.
The police dragged them out, and they came back the next day, and they caused a lot of ruckus again, and they got kicked out, and the third day they came back again. And 14 people caused such a big ruckus at the biggest international marketing communications festival in the entire world. And that's when I realized that, like, hey, if you multiply this by like 100 or 1,000, it makes sense why UK announced a climate emergency. It makes sense why the change is being created.
What they're saying here at the Cannes Festival is to use your creativity, use your imagination to fight the climate crisis.
And I came back to New York, and a week later, June 16th, I went to New York City's Extinction Rebellion local chapter meeting. And the person talked a little bit about XR's history, how 2 months ago they had an action outside of City Hall, which is our government building, and they blocked the Brooklyn Bridge. A bunch of people were arrested. And they told us about other actions, and then they concluded the talk with saying that, like, hey, as of a few hours ago, New York City just announced a climate emergency.
Resolution 864A, an amended resolution declaring a climate emergency and calling for an immediate emergency mobilization to restore a safe climate. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. And that's when I was like, all right, I saw it in France, I saw it in New York. A little bit later, I attended one of my first actions at the New York Times lobby to have them pull out of the Oil Money Conference. I shot a little short video, and pretty much in the next business day after the long weekend, New York Times pulled out. And then went to actions at BlackRock, which many environmental groups have done. And BlackRock, the biggest asset manager in the entire world, $7 trillion in assets, recently just issued a statement to shift their investing. In October, we had the International Rebellion with over 60,000 media mentions, almost 3,000 arrests. This was a global event that happened throughout the entire world. News is starting to cover climate change, government's starting to act, brands are starting to be more aware. But at the same time, CO2 still keeps going into our atmosphere. This is kind of like the Paris Agreement, where people know the problem exists but still carry on with business as usual. So our work here is more important than ever. I hope you take some time to reflect after this video and see how you can act and organize within your community. There's also other videos to check out, such as the XR DNA, our theories of change. As of this moment, as I'm speaking to you, these videos are not created yet. This is the first video, but they should be updated in the description below. Finally, with the biggest crisis of humanity at stake right now, where each week and month means so much to future generations, I want to ask you questions that I have asked myself, which have led me to the path that I am on, which is, what does it mean to die without regrets? What makes a good human being? And will you be able to look at your children or your grandchildren and tell them that you did what you could?